Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are actually talking about our mobile phone use, because quite frankly, we're addicted to our phones, and that's no real surprise. But the thing is, are we really? Now here's what's going on. This is actually coming from a local news source, Fox 5 in New York, and here's what's going on. New research shows that the United States is deep into the digital age, with data showing that Americans actually check their phones 96 times every single day. That's roughly once every 10 minutes, according to essentially the company that did this, which is the massive insurance provider for mobile phones, Asurion. Now, the company also said that's a 20% increase from a similar survey their researchers did 2 years ago. However, Asurion said that roughly 50% of Americans are actually attempting to use their phones less. Now, the company's data also shows that 18 to 24-year-olds, no surprise, check their phones twice as much as a national average, and basically that age group is aware of their heavy phone usage. Other key findings from the survey include that staying connected with family and friends is the number one reason that people use their phones. Texting is now common among all age groups, with baby boomers being 7 times more likely to text rather than talk in person, and twice as likely to send a text rather than dial a phone number. And I remember when text messaging was in its infancy and we had to press like the number 3 times to get the letter. And I was thinking to myself, I will never use this. Just call me, I'll call you, and here it is. We're all sending texts. I don't care. I'm not a boomer, but we're all sending texts. I don't care if you're Gen Z or boomer or silent or whatever, and anything in between. Also, for the record, and here's the kicker for me, and this is why I question a lot of these results, is that nearly 50% of Americans say that their smartphones are actually helping them achieve a better work-life balance. And that, I think, is a huge thing. We have to talk about that. Now, the survey showed that nearly 9 out of 10 Americans are actually offended when somebody they're speaking to starts looking at their phone, but ironically, 75% of the survey takers said they do that as well. I do my best not to do that unless I specify ahead of time, hey, I'm waiting for a call or something like that. However, there are ways to help pay attention and basically curb phone usage. So for example, the iPhone, if you're an iPhone user, your smartphone comes with a screen time feature that essentially clocks the total amount of time that you spend on your phone. I believe Android actually has that now as well. A Washington Post article suggested that people not check their emails first thing in the morning, and also set limits on when and where you can check your phone. Very hard for me because I have calls and everything oftentimes throughout the night here in the United States as I'm working with people internationally, and so I'm always checking my email on my phone, but that's a difficult one. Smartphone addiction at the moment isn't diagnosable as a condition under essentially the 5th edition of the DSM, that's the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which essentially is the catalog for officially recognized mental disorders here in the United States. Researchers show that smartphones basically trigger dopamine. Again, no surprise. Facebook does the same thing. That's a neurotransmitter responsible for your brain's reward and pleasure zones. So as you're checking your phone, you're looking for those likes, etc. Obviously, you're getting a hit of that dopamine. It's essentially the same chemical that we release when we're eating, and also, according to some studies, playing video games. So there you go. Now, the neurotransmitter has been tied to addiction, but knowing whether you have essentially developed an unhealthy dependence on your smartphone depends on you and your loved one's feelings, and that's according to John Grohol, founder of the online mental health resource Psych Central. So there you go. We're on our phones constantly, but the one thing I'm focusing on that I don't think this article mentioned is that 50% of us look at this as a work-life balance improvement. And by virtue of that, there's a lot of small tasks that I can do throughout the day if I'm not in front of my full-blown computers actually doing stuff, where I can quickly respond to an email, or I can quickly update my calendar, or I can quickly check, our internal communication system here at my company and respond to people in a timely manner, so I don't actually have to wait until I get back to a machine and an actual computer to do that. And so by virtue of that, I feel like by the time I do get back to the machine, because I'm not always sitting here, even though you see me in what I call the nerdery every single time you're watching a video or listening to this podcast, almost every single time, this is one of those things where I think it actually does improve that performance. Now, if we're sitting there looking at social media, or we have this intense craving to know who's liking our post or whatever, yeah, I think that borders on addiction. But if we're using it as a useful tool and supplementing that with basically saying, well, I'm going to have slightly more screen time on my phone as opposed to slightly more screen time at my desk, I don't see that necessarily as a problem. I see that as essentially just getting more things done throughout the day. And so by virtue of that, I think that's kind of okay. But again, addiction is addiction, and there are going to be people that simply have addictive personalities. There will be other people that could put down a smartphone, for a month and not bat an eye, and everybody is kind of on that spectrum somewhere. So wherever you fall, understand that essentially what you have in your hand, aside from a sea of sensors and privacy violating, smartphone and other devices, is you have a potentially addictive thing in your life by virtue of necessity of living in the modern world. And I think it's really imperative that you take the time to balance that, especially if you understand and recognize in yourself that, hey, I get addicted pretty easily. So that 96 times might be 200 times for you. It might be 30 for somebody else. So take that for what it's worth. That is your news of the day. I found this interesting, but I really do think that if half of us are looking at a smartphone as productive, I think a good chunk of us are actually using it in productive ways, and that's not a bad thing. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where you can possibly get addicted or not. And feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well, where you might get addicted to my videos. And I'm not necessarily saying no to that, but please don't be addicted. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.